I would like to know, when's the last time you felt really guilty? And I would love if you would tell us today. We got all sorts of time this morning. I would love to hear the last time you felt really guilty. When you got caught covering something up? When you worked your best to forget about it and it came back? I would love to hear. So we're just going to pause for a moment. I'll give you a chance to raise your hand. Anyone can start, and you can share the guiltiest stories of your past this morning. Pastor, you start, right? Isn't that something? In our culture, we will talk about anything but guilt. Talk about the weather. We will talk about the weekend. But what I feel guilty for? I don't want them to know that about me. They might look at me differently. They may not be my friend anymore if they know what I have done. We live in a culture that encourages you not to speak about your guilt. In fact, the only place that tells you to talk about your guilt is this one. The church is the only place that says every Sunday, address your guilt. Own it. Admit it. Every other institution in society always wants you to move on from it, to leave it behind. Therapy and counseling and education and even the local bar, all of them give you this idea that we've got to move on from that. Good behaviors, better strategies. And I am in no way trying to demean the important work of the Christian educator or counselor or therapist or even the Christian bartender. Your pastor was once a bartender. It's a very interesting experience. But all of those social sciences are limited in this way, that they can never remove guilt from a person. All of the social sciences are limited. Even good whiskey is limited in this way, that you can't get guilt off me. You can numb me to it. You can make me forget it. But nothing takes guilt away from me. And so in our culture and in our society, we try to ignore it. We don't tell others about it. We have this idea that guilt is a past tense thing that we have to live in the present today. And again, the church is the only place that owns up to that. The church is the only place where you can come in, and it is expected that we're going to talk about our guilt, to own it, to see it, to recognize it, so that God gets rid of it. See, God will go to great lengths to show you your guilt so that he can forgive you. And I think if anyone had been brave to share stories, although no one was going to, and neither was I, if anyone was brave enough to share stories, God goes to great lengths in your life to show you your guilt so that he can forgive you. And today he went to heavenly lengths to make that point clear. Today he literally took a man up into heaven to show him his guilt. He took this man, Isiah, and he showed him the perfect view of heaven. Isiah saw heaven, and he saw God sitting on this throne, marvelous and mighty, as we just sang. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine leaving this solid ground we stand on and standing on the clouds in heaven and seeing a being? It fills the entire expanse. And seeing a being so powerful, you quiver even in the sight of him. This is God in heaven. And a sinful man has been brought to see God in heaven. And God doesn't look at him. God doesn't say anything. But a man can't look at him. A man can't look at God that long in heaven, because this is something, sadly, about the essence of man. Man's essence is wrapped up in his guilt. When a godly prophet is brought up into heaven, he doesn't even want to look at God much longer. So he looks at the angels. He looks at the angels circling around God's head. These kind of weird angels I read about. Not precious moments approved angels. Angels that fly with 2 wings and cover their face with 2 wings and cover their body with their other 2. And all they do, all their purpose for all eternity, is to sing in surround sound, holy, holy, holy. That hymn we just sang, holy, 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 in surround sound for eternity. And the sinful man stands at the threshold of the temple, hearing the shaking from singing. He watches the smoke flitter in. He sees God himself. Wow. And to understand the guilt that man feels, you have to understand why the angels are covering themselves. Why are angels hiding their face and their body? It's because while they are perfect, they are not as holy as God. That here, in the presence of the Creator, in the presence of the being who is holiness, if man's essence is guilt, God's essence is holy. And we saw today 3 times holy. And here are these created beings who are singing in his presence, but even they know the difference. He's holy, I'm not. He is so holy that I need to cover myself because his holiness is too marvelous even for me to see. And you ask me, Pastor, that doesn't make sense. If the angels are perfect, aren't they also holy? I mean, if they're a perfect creation, aren't they at the same level? And that's the problem with our human minds. You can't much comprehend what heaven looks like, so much so you can comprehend its characters. The characters in heaven that are existent for praise, even those characters say, God is too holy for me. Even angels with 6 wings shield themselves because his majesty is so majestic. I have to cover myself from this holiness. And no surprise then if the earth shakes and the surround sound of angels rumble and the angels cover them face, that man's guilt bubbles to the surface. No surprise that this godly man, Isaiah, seeing this heavenly scene, that guilt he's tried to repress over his life, that bubbles up right now. That bubbles up to him now to confess something before God. Notice God hasn't asked him anything. God hasn't said anything. And yet Isaiah says, woe to me, I am ruined. Let me translate that little Hebrew phrase for you. That means, I am going to die. Every time in Hebrew somebody says that phrase, woe to me, whether Job or Jeremiah or Baruch, that means they expect death. And no surprise. I am in the presence of holiness, and all I can feel at this moment is not awe, is not reverence, is not joining in praise. All I feel is this sinking realization that my essence is guilt and I don't belong here. I don't deserve to be seeing this. And so this prophet of God, who is brought into God's house, he says, woe to me, I am ruined. Because I am a man of unclean lips. An interesting picture. Unclean lips. We don't often think of our lips as dirty, do we? I mean, I'm assuming most of you showered this morning or last night. And when you showered, you washed your face and your hair and your body, and you probably brushed your teeth for good measure. Did any of you clean your lips? Did any gentleman in this morning, when he was shaving, make sure that there was nothing dirty on his lips? I guarantee you there probably wasn't. We don't think of our lips as being clean or dirty. We just think of them as lips. My hair's fine. There's no dirt on my face. I don't smell. Out the door. That's the life for most college students, isn't it? So this idea that my lips are dirty, this is foreign to the way Americans like to think. The reason is because we use our lips for evil. We just don't see that as evil. Our lips are just as dirty as Isaiah. We just don't see what we're doing is evil. Our lips tell lies about others. You know, even the lie when you see somebody and you say, "Oh, it's so good to see you," when really that is not true. Even that's a lie. Our lips ridicule our coworkers. Our lips list all of the problems that we have with them and all of these solutions, and we know we shouldn't do it, and yet we do it again. Our lips complain about family. Complain they haven't gotten their act together yet. Complain that you have to do all of this and they don't have to do anything. Our lips lie and they ridicule and they complain. And if every sin stained our lips, if every sin that we have done stained our lips, how dirty would your lips be? Oh, we would have quite filthy lips, wouldn't we? We would have quite dark and sinister and sinful lips. This is what Isaiah understood. All my sinfulness, all my guilt, all my problems, when I stand in place of holy God, I just can't lie it out. I just can't forget about it. I just can't be nice to people and wait till they go away and then tell others how I really feel. No, in God's holy presence, I realize just how sinful I am. And of all the body parts to identify, the forefront of my sin comes from these sinful lips. What to do with our sinful lips? What to do with the guilt that we feel for the sins that we have done? When you come into God's house bearing the burden of your guilt, when you come in and are identified with your sin, how does God treat you? Does he say, "Oh, that's okay, just try harder next time"? Well, it really didn't matter to me. Everybody's going to heaven, no problem whatsoever. No, the vision of heaven is quite clear. Guilty man expects to die because the guilt of my sin is not taken away. That is the problem with man, that his essence is guilt, and you cannot get rid of that guilt. No, someone has to get rid of that for you. And that's what that angel did in heaven. That angel came to him. He took one of the coals from God's altar and he brought it to his mouth. And he said, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin atoned for." Sinful man, that guilt that you have carried, it has been taken away. Well, where did it go? It went there. The holy God, the one who angels have to hide their face and bodies from, that holy God descended from heaven and took on guilt. That holy God took on the guilt of your sins, of your youth, of your rebellion, of your yelling in the car on the way home. That holy God took on guilt and sacrificed himself in that place. And God punished sin. God put his holy son on that cross, made him bear guilt, and made sure he was punished. He used the Roman soldiers to whip his only boy. He used the Roman people to laugh and to jeer. He saved others, save himself. And even he would darken the sky as his son begs, "Why have you forsaken me?" There is no answer, because you're guilty, boy. You are guilty for the sins of the world, and I am punishing you. The fires of God's wrath poured down on the altar of sacrifice, which is the cross. And because the fires of God's wrath burned themselves out on the cross, on that altar, when we get to heaven, When you get to the altar of God and the fires that keep that altar alive, well, that fire doesn't burn you. That fire doesn't condemn you. That fire doesn't kill you. That fire cleanses you. An angel can take a coal and put it to its lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. This is the work of holy God, to destroy guilt and take away our sin. And this is the work of the Trinity. That the Father would punish his Son, that the Son would give up his life, and that the Spirit would come into guilt-ridden hearts like yours and mine and take away that guilt and plant instead faith. Plant trust in a holy God I cannot comprehend, who removes the thing I can never get rid of on my own. This is how God works for his people. This is how God works by destroying his Son, the Holy One, and taking away our guilt. Make no mistake, you come into church guilty. You come into church with burdens. You come into church with issues. And yet, the joy of this place is that the cross is empty. The fires have already been burned out. And now instead, our 3 times holy God, what does he bring? He brings forgiveness. That when I stand in this place, or in that place, or in your living room, or wherever you are, when you sit and stand in that place and you say, Lord, I feel guilty again. Lord, I see my sin again. Lord, I fell into that again. Forgive me. You have this picture. You have this picture of forgiveness with God's perfect angel bringing it and touching you and forgiving you. God doesn't tolerate guilt. He removes it from you. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin is atoned for. This is the majesty of the work in heaven that God brings down to you and I today. Sometimes we take that interaction for granted. The freedom to say, I am sorry. And the comfort to hear, you are forgiven. Through the work of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, you are forgiven. Your sin atoned, your guilt removed. This is what God does for us. This is why we come. This is why we listen. Because this is his holy essence. A marvelous one. And that's what we need. We need this in a life where we feel so guilty from our choices. We suffer from our consequences. We play over in our mind, should I have done this? Should I have done that? You keep yourself up at night with what ifs. So often we live in that. No, live here. Live in the holiness of what God has brought to you. This was once, since it is no longer. Because God took the eraser of his Son and removed it from you. God does not define you by your guilt any longer. He does not define Isaiah by his guilt any longer. It is taken away. It is removed. And the joy of the story is that a man is in heaven and a man sees God, and God doesn't damn him. God doesn't punish him. The joy of the story is Isaiah gets to see heaven, and then he gets to come back down to earth to bring that message to others. And for you and I today, as we get this view of heaven, that's something to hold on to. It is something to remember of the forgiveness that is ours in heaven and that we have today. Otherwise, life doesn't have much purpose. Otherwise, the consequences of our decisions seem to be crippling. Otherwise, the frustrations we live with. Oh, why am I doing this? You hear this bad news from your child. Your child has disappointed you again. How that sends you into a spiral. You hear this unfortunate problem at work, and your job gets a little dicey. How that worries your mind. How you lose money or family or house and home or income. And you think, where will I have this again? How often in our life things are being taken from us and we think, well, where and why? So here today, here you have the picture of God. Even if your kids mess up, even if you lose your job, even if you lose family and friends and income and your 401k, you got to see heaven and God didn't damn you. You got to witness the shaking of angels surround sound and live to tell the story. You got to see the smoke and the wonders of God and what he has done, and he did not condemn you. Because your essence is no longer wrapped up in what you used to be. Yes, in your life you'll have difficulties with family. Your work will be a challenge. The struggles you have on the car ride home could be enough to lay you low for a week. I am not attempting to be callous to the challenges you faced. I'm just saying, as a once guilty sinner who has seen the holiness of God, eternally that doesn't matter. Eternally, that's not a consequence. Eternally, that will not change my dynamic between holy God and sinful man, because holy God saw fit to bring sinful man into his house, to remove guilt and bring him in. You got to see heaven today in all of its splendor, and God will still let you walk out the door, still let you go to your car, still let you get brunch, and still let you live because of his son's sacrifice. What to do with that forgiveness? Isaiah tells us. And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Who will I send to tell this message of forgiveness, of guilt is gone?" And Isaiah said, "Here am I, send me." Amen. Please stand.